Lionel Messi. Every era of football eventually produces a player who changes how the game is understood. With Lionel Messi, the shift arrived through clarity. When Messi had the ball, football slowed just enough for him to see things others couldn't, giving him one of the best traits we will feature in today's video, his vision. Not just seeing passes, but recognizing when a pass would hurt the most. You saw this play out across those Barcelona seasons, where tight matches suddenly opened without warning. One touch near the edge of the box, a half-second pause, and the ball slipped between defenders who thought the danger was under control. It even got better. Against Bayern Munich in 2015, a single dribble froze the defense before Messi rolled the ball calmly into space for Neymar to finish. A moment that didn't come from speed or power, but from timing and awareness. And in finals like 2011 against Manchester United, Messi drifted into midfield zones, drew pressure, and released teammates into space before defenses could reset. These weren't flashes of brilliance, they were rehearsed patterns disguised as improvisation. His dribbling followed the same logic. He didn't run at defenders to overwhelm them, he invited pressure. Watch those sequences where he carried the ball straight toward a back line, barely accelerating, letting defenders step forward first. One body feint later, the lane opened. The balance did the rest. The damage came from anticipation, not explosion. But he had a problem with his physicality. You see, Messi was never built to overpower opponents. He didn't win duels through strength. He didn't impose himself through speed over distance. His effectiveness relied on rhythm and protection. When matches turned into repeated physical battles, shoulder challenges, aerial duels, constant pressing, his influence depended heavily on what existed around him. Matches where Barcelona were pressed aggressively or Argentina struggled to progress, the ball forced Messi deeper and deeper, asking him to collect possession under contact and solve multiple phases alone. The vision stayed sharp. The ideas remained clear. The physical toll accumulated quickly. This limitation shaped every system Messi played in. Teams didn't ask him to fight the game, they asked the game to give him space. Midfielders absorbed pressure, fullbacks stretched the pitch. Defensive structure existed to keep chaos away from him. When that balance held, Messi dictated matches. When it didn't, football's physical demands narrowed his impact. That trade-off never diminished his greatness though. Cristiano Ronaldo. If Lionel Messi bent football with ideas, Cristiano Ronaldo bent it with obsession. His best trait has always been finishing. Not volume for the sake of numbers, finishing that arrived exactly when knockout ties demanded it. He turned penalty areas into personal territory. One cross, one loose clearance, one lapse in marking, and the story shifted. You saw it on those Champions League nights when ties leaned the wrong way. Wolfsburg arrived in Madrid with a lead and left watching Ronaldo keep attacking the same spaces until the aggregate flipped completely. Juventus tried to manage Atletico Madrid's 2-goal advantage and watched the box fill with Ronaldo again and again, the third goal arriving when tension was at its peak. Bayern Munich pushed games into extra time and found him still moving like the clock didn't apply. He didn't drift through matches waiting to be involved. He positioned himself where moments arrived late. The back post, the rebound zone, the penalty spot after pressure finally broke structure. Defenders could track him for 80 minutes and still lose him once. His movement made that possible. He studied defensive lines relentlessly. He peeled away from centre-backs, waited for them to step, then attacked the space behind them. Even as his pace evolved over time, the timing stayed ruthless. The leap stayed violent. The contact stayed clean. But as his game narrowed toward final actions, his influence shifted away from the early phases of play. He didn't orchestrate build-up, he didn't slow games down to manage rhythm. His presence lived at the end of sequences, not inside them. Teams progressed the ball first. Ronaldo finished the work. You felt this most in matches where possession stalled. When midfield control disappeared or service dried up, Ronaldo stayed high and conserved energy. The threat remained constant, but the connective tissue between lines depended on others. Wingers became suppliers, fullbacks stretched the pitch, midfielders carried the workload forward. Kylian Mbappé. His best trait is speed, not track speed, game speed, the kind that forces decisions before defenders are ready to make them. He doesn't need build-up or rhythm. He needs one forward touch and a defender who hesitates. The world met this version of Mbappé properly in Russia. Against Argentina in the World Cup, the match shifted the moment he started running beyond the back line. Fouls followed, penalties arrived. A teenager was suddenly dictating the tempo of a knockout game simply by accelerating into space. He almost rewrote the script during that cup. Club football reinforced the pattern. Champions League ties where structure mattered less than moments suited him perfectly. At the Camp Nou against Barcelona, he didn't ease into the game. He attacked the space behind the defense over and over until the tie stopped feeling competitive. Every run stretched the pitch. Every finish punished hesitation. It felt less like a tactical battle and more like survival. His movement sharpened the threat. He rarely drifted aimlessly. He waited on the shoulder. He timed the burst. When the line stepped up, he was already gone. Defenders learned that playing high invited danger and playing deep still wasn't safe. The speed forced fear either way, but he has a weakness. His influence depends heavily on flow. When games open up, he dominates territory. When space closes and rhythm slows, his imprint can fade. Tight defensive blocks, slow circulation, and matches that demand patience place heavier demands on his involvement. You've seen games where he stayed wide for long stretches, waiting for the moment that never arrived. The threat remained, defenders never relaxed, but the touches dropped. In matches like PSG's Champions League nights against compact low blocks, where opponents refused to push their line, Mbappé spent long phases watching play recycle across midfield. The bursts became fewer, the runs stopped hurting. When service dried up and space refused to open, the game asked for answers that speed alone couldn't always provide. Virgil Van Dijk. This guy has always been calm, not passive calm, commanding calm. The kind that changes how opponents behave before the ball even reaches him. Strikers learned quickly that sprinting blindly toward him led nowhere. Dribblers hesitated, crosses went early, just to avoid dealing with him directly. This was clear during Liverpool's Champions League run in 2019. In knockout games where margins were thin, Van Dijk controlled space rather than chasing the ball. Against Bayern Munich, he held the line, cut off angles, and forced attacks wide until they dissolved. In the final against Tottenham, he barely needed to intervene aggressively. The danger died before it arrived. His positioning did most of the work. Van Dijk read passes early and adjusted half a step at a time, always staying balanced. He didn't dive in, he didn't overcommit. When attackers tried to shift the ball past him, they ran out of room. When crosses came in, he owned the air without making it dramatic. That calm extended to leadership, but his authority relies heavily on timing and positioning, and that balance gets tested against pure speed, hence an issue with recovery pace. When attacks bypass structure and turn into foot races, the margins shrink. Rapid transitions and explosive runners force him into recovery situations he prefers to avoid. Games against sides built on vertical speed tested that balance. When Liverpool's line broke and transitions stretched the pitch, like those high-tempo clashes against runners attacking from wide channels, Van Dijk faced a different kind of problem, one that demanded recovery pace instead of anticipation. His reading stayed sharp, but the margins tightened once the game stopped living in front of him. Erling Haaland. Robot doesn't need momentum, he creates pressure just by standing there, and that's why his best trait is power combined with timing. Not reckless power, directed power. He doesn't wrestle defenders for fun. He waits, then explodes into the space that hurts the most. When the ball arrives, the finish usually follows. The Premier League learned this quickly. Early in his Manchester City run, games started to look unfair. Against Nottingham Forest, space appeared once and vanished immediately after. Against Manchester United, the box filled with defenders and still couldn't contain him. The movement stayed simple, the finishes stayed brutal. Defenders weren't losing because they made mistakes. They were losing because Haaland arrived faster and stronger than expected. European nights told the same story. In Champions League knockout games, Haaland didn't decorate the match, he punished it. Against RB Leipzig, one opening turned into a flood of goals. Once the first finish landed, the entire defense collapsed under the weight of constant pressure. The game stopped being tactical and became physical survival. What made him terrifying was how little he needed to do to score. Few touches, few decisions, one run, one contact, outcome decided. Teams that tried to dominate possession still felt unsafe because Haaland only needed a single breakdown to flip control. But his influence lives almost entirely inside the final phase of play. This guy doesn't know anything about playmaking. He didn't study that part in his academic years. He doesn't slow games down to manage rhythm. Long stretches can pass without him touching the ball, and the threat still hangs in the air. You've seen matches where City controlled possession for minutes at a time while Haaland stayed quiet, occupying defenders rather than joining sequences. The link-up didn't arrive, the touches stayed minimal. His value existed in the space he created, not the passes he played. He is trying to change that this season, but how effective has it been? That shapes how teams use him. Midfielders carry progression duties, wingers stretch the pitch, fullbacks provide width. Haaland waits. When the moment arrives, the punishment is immediate. When it doesn't, his presence still alters defensive decisions. Luka Modric, he has always been in control. Not possession for possession's sake, control of tempo, space, and decision speed. He understood when to accelerate play and when to drain energy from it. Matches bent toward his rhythm, even when opponents tried to force theirs. This was clear at the highest level in Madrid's Champions League runs. Against Liverpool in the 2018 final, Modric dictated midfield exchanges without needing to score or assist. The ball moved where pressure wasn't. The game flowed through him quietly. In later knockout rounds against sides like Chelsea and Manchester City, his touches came in the moments that stabilized chaos. A turn away from pressure, a clipped pass over the press, a pause that reset everything. International football amplified this trait. At the 2018 World Cup, Croatia played deep into the tournament with Modric carrying responsibility far beyond his size. Extra time matches piled up, midfields tired, Modric stayed composed, the passes stayed sharp, the decisions stayed clean. He didn't outrun opponents, he outlasted their ideas. His intelligence made this possible. He read pressing traps early and stepped away from danger before it closed. He rarely needed to tackle aggressively because he positioned himself where tackles weren't required. When the ball moved through him, teams breathed easier. But his influence demands energy, and energy becomes more precious with time. The longer matches stretch and the faster transitions become, the heavier the workload grows. Undeniably, tracking runners takes a toll, especially in games that refuse to slow down. You saw this during the later Champions League knockout rounds, where matches turned into repeated transitions instead of midfield battles. Modric still chose his moments brilliantly, but the recovery runs became selective. The intelligence never left. The control remained. The workload simply demanded rationing rather than constant domination. Neymar. His best trait has always been flair, not decoration for the sake of show, but creativity driven by confidence. He played with the belief that defenders were problems meant to be solved publicly. Stepovers, flicks, sudden accelerations, everything came with intent. When Neymar attacked space, he did it to unbalance the entire structure. In matches where Messi drew attention centrally, Neymar punished space-wide. Against Bayern Munich in the UCL 2015, he ran directly at a defense that rarely panicked and forced it into retreat. Goals followed. The rhythm tilted, the game bent toward him because defenders didn't want to engage. International tournaments showed the same pattern. At the 2014 World Cup, Brazil's attack revolved around Neymar's freedom. Every possession felt designed to isolate him against defenders. Fouls piled up. Attention followed him everywhere. His creativity was Brazil's engine. His flair extended beyond dribbling. He saw passes others didn't attempt, quick combinations, disguised through balls, late runs into the box. He played like the game belonged to him. When confidence flowed, matches turned into exhibitions. Defenders didn't just lose duels, they lost control. But came the injuries. His influence has always depended on availability and emotional rhythm, but physical punishment followed him relentlessly. Defenders targeted him early. Matches slowed into fouls and stoppages. Injuries interrupted momentum at the worst times. There were seasons where his brilliance arrived in bursts rather than stretches. A Champions League night like Paris Saint-Germain's comeback against Atalanta in 2020, where one touch unlocked the game and shifted the entire tie, followed by weeks where he wasn't on the pitch at all. Tournament runs defined by moments, the solo dribbles, the sudden spark, and then halted by injuries that pulled him out just as momentum built. The talent never left. What kept slipping away was continuity. That unpredictability shaped how teams planned around him. Systems had to account for sudden absences. Attacks adjusted week to week. He remained the focal point, yet the rhythm around him never fully settled for long. Vinícius. He doesn't wait for permission. He attacks football like it owes him something. The ball reaches his feet and the game immediately tilts toward conflict. Defenders backpedal, teammates spread out, the crowd senses trouble before it arrives. He is the true meaning of chaos. Not reckless chaos, directed chaos. He plays to break structure. Every touch invites confrontation. Every run forces defenders to choose between backing off or getting embarrassed. He doesn't slow the game down, he drags it forward. For instance, against Liverpool in 2022, he attacked the space behind the defense relentlessly. One run was enough. The finish in the final came from pure timing and belief, arriving at the back post when everyone else hesitated. The moment didn't feel lucky, it felt inevitable. Big nights kept confirming the pattern. Against Manchester City, when games tightened and nerves crept in, Vinícius kept running directly at defenders who wanted control. Touches piled up, fouls followed. The game stretched because he refused to let it settle. His dribbling fuels that threat. Vinícius doesn't dance on the ball for applause. He pushes it past defenders and commits to the outcome. Speed, close control, and confidence combine into a style that defenders struggle to manage cleanly. Even when he doesn't beat his man, he destabilizes the entire shape. But he plays on emotion, and emotion cuts both ways. When decisions don't go his way, frustration enters the game. When fouls pile up, reactions follow. The intensity that powers his chaos can spill over into moments of impatience. And no wonder defenders targeted him physically and mentally, trying to drag him into arguments instead of duels. When focus drifted, the game slowed around him. The threat stayed real, defenders never relaxed, but efficiency dipped. That emotional edge shaped his growth. Real Madrid didn't ask him to calm down completely, they asked him to channel it. As his decision-making improved, the chaos became more controlled, runs became sharper, finishing became cleaner. The moments started ending in goals instead of protests. Declan Rice. His best trait is coverage. Not flashy interceptions or crunching tackles for highlights. Coverage of space, lanes, and risk. He reads danger early and steps into it before it turns into panic. When Rice is positioned correctly, attacks lose momentum without anyone noticing why. This was evident during his final seasons at West Ham. In European knockout matches, where games swung quickly, Rice anchored the midfield and refused to let chaos take over. Against teams that tried to break fast, he closed passing lanes early and forced attacks wide. The game slowed because he decided where it could go. That influence translated immediately at Arsenal. In high-pressure league matches, he gave structure to aggressive pressing. When fullbacks pushed high and midfielders advanced, he held the center and cleaned up transitions. The ball rarely stuck to him for long. It moved safely, on time, and forward when possible. But he plays with restraint. His decisions prioritize security over risk. When games call for sudden invention or daring vertical passes, he often chooses stability instead. The rhythm stays intact, but creativity doesn't always arrive through him. You've seen matches where Rice recycled possession calmly while others took responsibility for breaking lines. The defensive work remained elite. The control stayed strong. The final pass came from elsewhere. That's not hesitation, it's identity. Rice doesn't gamble with the game, he protects it. Teams that rely on him accept that trade. They gain security, structure, and balance. They look elsewhere for moments of invention. Kevin De Bruyne. This one is obvious, passing vision, and not just spotting a run, but delivering the ball at the exact moment it becomes unstoppable. He doesn't wait for teammates to ask for it. He sends the pass where they're about to be. Against Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea, De Bruyne didn't dominate possession. He dominated consequences. A low cross drilled across the 6-yard box. A first-time through ball, splitting a line that thought it was set. The game didn't need build-up. It needed one mistake. De Bruyne found it. Champions League nights showed the same pattern. In knockout matches where space vanished quickly, De Bruyne played passes defenders couldn't adjust to in time. For instance, you remember the assist to Bernardo Silva against Real Madrid? Exactly. What makes him different is risk tolerance. He doesn't protect the ball for comfort. He challenges structure. Every pass carries intent. He aims for the most damaging option available, even when it fails. When it works, games collapse immediately, but his game demands freedom and energy, and so having an issue with the defense. When possession turns over, he is rarely the player slowing the counter or tracking the dangerous runner. In chaotic transitions, he often stays advanced, scanning forward instead of reacting backward. Recovery runs are inconsistent, and defensive positioning is secondary to attacking awareness. You see this most clearly in open games where midfield control disappears. De Bruyne doesn't become the stabilizer, he becomes a spectator until the next attacking phase begins. Opponents who break lines quickly can bypass him without resistance. Griezmann. This is the guy who never needed to overpower football. He outfought it. And no wonder, his defining trait is intelligence. Intelligence that quietly controls outcomes. He understood where the danger would appear before it actually did. Runs came early, pressing triggers arrived on time. Defenders realized too late that they'd already been pulled out of position. Take France's 2018 World Cup run, for example. Griezmann didn't dominate matches with dribbles or speed. He dominated them with positioning and timing. Against Argentina, Uruguay, and Croatia, he appeared exactly where the game needed control. Set pieces landed with precision. Fouls were drawn in dangerous zones. The rhythm bent towards him without drama. Club football told the same story. At Atletico Madrid, Griezmann became the connective tissue between midfield and attack. In tight La Liga matches, when space vanished and tempo dropped, he stayed active without forcing play. One touch to relieve pressure, one run to stretch the back line, one pass to reset the attack. The influence stacked up quietly. His off-ball work amplified that intelligence. His pressed with purpose, not energy wasted. He closed angles, forced mistakes, and triggered teammates to step higher. Coaches trusted him because he understood structure. He didn't just play in a system, he helped run it. But his game depends heavily on reading play rather than overwhelming it physically. He has a pace issue. In matches that turn into repeated sprints or foot races, he struggles to separate from defenders. Explosive acceleration is not part of his toolkit, and once space closes, he cannot simply run away from pressure. You see it when games stretch vertically. Younger, faster defenders stay tight, deny space early, and force Griezmann into deeper areas. He adapts by dropping, but the direct threat disappears. When football becomes about speed rather than positioning, his influence drops sharply. Jude Bellingham. From the opening minutes, he plays like the responsibility already belongs to him. Teammates follow, opponents notice. The match starts bending around his energy whether anyone planned for it or not. He has the drive, literally the engine of Real Madrid. He carries himself like someone who expects to decide outcomes. Every run has intent, every challenge has weight. He doesn't drift through midfield hoping to influence play. He forces his way into it. Like in early league matches with Real Madrid, Bellingham kept arriving late into the box while defenses focused elsewhere. Goals piled up because he attacked moments others hesitated on. The runs weren't flashy, they were ruthless. The timing did the damage. Champions League nights reinforced it. Intense knockout games, when midfield battles tightened and tempo dropped, Bellingham still pushed forward. He carried the ball through pressure, drew fouls in dangerous areas, and dragged the game into decisive zones. The confidence never dipped, even when the match demanded maturity beyond his years. His physicality supports that authority. Bellingham covers ground effortlessly, wins duels cleanly, and recovers quickly. When games turn transitional, he doesn't disappear. He powers through them. Managers trust him because he doesn't fade when responsibility increases. But his hunger to influence everything can stretch his decision-making. He wants to drive play, finish attacks, recover defensively, and lead transitions all at once. That ambition creates moments where efficiency drops. Extra touches, rushed shots, ambitious carries into traffic. There are games where he dominates involvement but wastes decisive moments. He forces carries, takes shots too early, or pushes into traffic instead of recycling possession. The intent is aggressive. The output doesn't always match it. There are matches where his presence is obvious, yet the final numbers stay quiet. Attacks stall because he tries to accelerate outcomes rather than let them develop. William Saliba, his best trait is composure, not calm for show, calm under real pressure. When attackers sprint at him, he doesn't panic, he waits. He keeps his body open, he reads the next touch instead of the current one. The tackle arrives only when the outcome is already decided. In high-pressure league matches against aggressive attacking sides, Saliba handled isolation without fuss. When teams tried to pull him wide and attack space behind the line, he stayed balanced and forced attackers into low-percentage decisions. Duels ended quietly. The crowd barely noticed because nothing exploded. Big moments confirmed the pattern. Against elite forwards who relied on pace and movement, Saliba didn't chase shadows, he controlled distance. He delayed just enough for support to arrive. When the tackle came, it looked simple because the work happened earlier, but he plays with restraint, and restraint limits aggression. There are moments when the game demands a dominant step forward, an interception that breaks lines, a risk taken early to win the ball higher up the pitch. Saliba often chooses safety over confrontation. There are matches where he stayed compact while teammates stepped out to press. The shape held, the danger stayed contained. The attacking transition didn't always ignite from his side. His influence leaned toward protection rather than provocation. Rodri. He knows and understands control way better than anyone, especially last season. When Rodri holds his position, passing lanes disappear, counters slow down, opponents feel like they're running uphill without realizing why. Against Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and Inter, Rodri stayed anchored while everything around him rotated. When City lost the ball, he was already in the right place. When pressure arrived, he turned out cleanly and reset the attack. The game stayed on City's terms because he refused to let it drift. The ultimate example came in the Champions League final against Inter. A tight match, few openings, nerves everywhere. Then Rodri arrived at the edge of the box and finished calmly. One moment of execution from the least chaotic player on the pitch decided the biggest game of the season. No celebration frenzy, no theatrics, just confirmation of his value. His intelligence amplifies that influence. He reads second balls early and steps into spaces before attackers can exploit them. Fouls happen far from goal. Attacks reset instead of explode. His presence allows others to take risks because someone is always protecting the center, but he relies heavily on positioning and anticipation. When matches turn into pure foot races, his lack of explosive pace becomes visible. Rapid transitions and open field sprints force him into recovery situations he prefers to avoid. You've seen games where opponents tried to bypass midfield quickly, pushing play wide and attacking space behind him. When the structure broke, the job became harder. Rodri adapted by delaying rather than chasing, choosing angles instead of acceleration. Trent Alexander-Arnold. His best trait is crossing from deep areas. He treats the right back position like a playmaking station. The ball reaches him and suddenly the field opens up. Long diagonals, whipped crosses, disguised through balls, he delivers them with the confidence of a midfielder and the range of a quarterback. For instance, against Barcelona in 2019, with the game balanced on tension, Trent spotted a moment before anyone else. The quick corner didn't come from trickery, it came from awareness. One touch, one decision, and the tie flipped. It was a defender deciding a European semi-final with imagination. League matches reinforced the pattern. In games where Liverpool pressed high and pinned teams back, Trent acted as the main distributor. Early crosses found runners, switches of play dragged defenses out of shape. Attacks started from his foot, not from central midfield. His passing range changed how opponents defended Liverpool. Fullbacks stopped stepping forward, wingers tracked deeper, pressing triggers shifted. One misplaced step opened space Trent was already aiming for, but his positioning as a defender, nowhere to be found. When Real Madrid lose the ball, his advanced and narrow positioning leaves space behind him that opponents deliberately target. He is frequently pulled into recovery sprints instead of defensive reads. Fast wingers isolate him in open space. Centre-backs are forced wide to cover. The defensive line bends to protect his side. This happened repeatedly at Liverpool, not occasionally. Mohamed Salah. His defining trait is directness. He doesn't waste movement. He doesn't decorate possession. When the ball reaches him, the objective is clear. Get closer to goal as fast as possible. The game narrows. Decisions accelerate. Defenders are forced to react immediately or suffer the consequence. This has been him at Liverpool. In that record-breaking league season, attacks didn't need build-up to feel dangerous. One turnover, one diagonal pass, and Salah was already running at a retreating backline. Big nights followed the same rhythm. Against teams in the Champions League knockout rounds, Salah punished high defensive lines with early runs and ruthless finishing. His movement made that reliability possible. He doesn't drift aimlessly across the front line. He positions himself where defenders feel uncomfortable stepping out. One touch inside, one burst beyond the shoulder, and the decision is forced. Fullbacks back off, centre-backs hesitate, the gap appears. But when matches slow down and defenses sit deep without space behind them, his creativity weakens. When opponents sit deep and deny transition space, he often receives the ball wide, cuts inside, and runs into congestion. The pattern repeats without breaking the block. Shots get crowded out, passing options narrow. In slow, low-tempo games, Salah does not consistently create solutions on his own. He waits for movement around him or a defensive mistake that may never come. Against low blocks, his influence depends heavily on others. Phil Foden. His defining trait is technique paired with movement. Not showy technique, but functional control. He receives the ball cleanly under pressure and moves it before defenders settle. Angles appear because he shifts them with his first touch. Space opens because he knows where to stand before the pass even comes. In matches where opponents tried to crowd midfield, Foden drifted into half spaces and kept the tempo alive. Even this season, against different teams, he has found pockets between lines and played quick combinations that broke pressing traps without needing long carries or risk. Then comes his versatility aspect that amplifies that impact. He doesn't cling to one role. Left wing, central midfield, false wide position, he adapts without losing sharpness. Pep trusts him because he understands structure. He doesn't abandon shape to chase the ball, he fits into it and improves it. But he has a strength problem. He thrives in systems that control possession and stretch defenses. In matches that turn physical early or demand repeated duels, his impact depends on timing rather than strength. You've seen games where defenders leaned into him aggressively, cutting off angles and forcing play wide. The technique stayed clean, the movement stayed smart. The ability to impose himself physically didn't always arrive. That shaped how City used him. Foden wasn't asked to dominate duels, he was asked to find space, keep rhythm, and deliver quality when it mattered. The system protected him because his output justified it. Harry Kane. While defenders sprint and midfield scramble, Kane takes a second longer, and that second usually costs someone a goal. His game isn't built on surprise, it's built on inevitability. His best trait is intelligence, not just striker intelligence inside the box, but full game awareness. He knows where defenders are, where space is about to open, and when a run matters more than a touch. He plays like someone who understands the entire pitch, not just the penalty area. Go back to his Tottenham days during their peak years. In matches where Spurs struggled to progress the ball, Kane dropped deeper and became the solution himself. Against teams that pressed high, he pulled centre-backs out of position, received between lines, and released runners into space. The goals followed later because the groundwork had already been laid. Big tournament moments reinforced it. At the 2018 World Cup, he relied on anticipation. Loose balls in the box, defenders ball watching, slight delays, Kane punished all of it. And no wonder the golden boot came along. His finishing reflects that same mindset. He doesn't need perfect service. He adjusts his body early, strikes cleanly, and keeps shots low and decisive. Left foot, right foot, first time, late. The technique stays reliable because the decision is already made. But his game doesn't lean on acceleration. When matches stretch into foot races or demand repeated explosive sprints, he operates within tighter margins. He isn't chasing balls into wide channels or outrunning defenders over long distances. There were games where high defensive lines invited pressure and Kane stayed central, choosing positioning over pursuit. The link-up stayed sharp. The movement stayed intelligent. The separation arrived through timing rather than speed. And it's a wrap. If you enjoyed the video, you'll surely love this one.